So it is my pleasure to introduce you Shane P. Desselle, who serves as the Associate Dean for Research and Professional Affairs and Professor of Social and Behavioral Pharmacy at Touro University in California. He received...
Don't read the whole thing, please, Celia.
No, not the whole thing, just the important
Please
part.
don't.
He's Bachelor in Science and in Pharmacy and PhD from the University of Louisiana in Monroe. He is the founding the editor-in-chief of the journal Research in Social and Administrative Pharmacy, and also the exploratory research in clinical and social pharmacy, which is focusing more on scalable projects in developing countries. He has received several prestigious awards, and his research focuses on expanding the roles of pharmacists in patient safety, creating standards for pharmacist care in complementary medicines, and the professionalization of pharmacy technicians. He's also a Fulbright specialist scholar and has served as a visiting professor at institutions like the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, the University of Copenhagen, and currently in the University of Granada. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and we look forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Celia. I know people don't like to do this, but since I don't know any of you or very few of you, it would be great if some people turned on their cameras. It would be absolutely wonderful if people turn on their cameras so I can see who I'm talking to. And just really quickly, either in the chat or maybe Adriana or Celia can answer a little bit about the audience that I'm speaking to this evening, or do we have faculty, grad students? Who do we mostly have here this evening?
You have some academics, some PhD students. I see also one master student, soon a PhD, but people.
Okay. Well, again, hello, everyone. Besides the formal introduction that Celia gave me, it's my pleasure to be here again. As she mentioned, I'm here in Granada. In fact, I'm in Victoria Cardenas's office right now, for those of you who know her. And I assume most of you do, I don't know. I've been working with Victoria. Victoria is an associate editor for the journal that Celia mentioned in her introduction, and has been for a number of years. And so I've developed a very close relationship with Victoria over the last few years, and just very, very honored and privileged to work with her and be a part of the University of Granada, a very productive group, very friendly group, and I'm really enjoying my stay. In fact, all of you are obviously from here or from around here, but I still had the most beautiful photos that I wanted to share. But I've even though I was able to share my screen with my students last night, I taught a 3-hour class last night to my students back in America, and I was not able to share my photos with them. I don't know why it didn't work. I was able to thankfully share my slides, so I was able to teach. So even though you're from here, I just took these lovely photos, and I just love it here in Granada. Just such a beautiful place. Even this morning, before my wife's leaving tomorrow, while I'm here for another week or so, we went to this lovely place, and I had it was help me, it's a red bean soup. What is it called? Habichuelos? Does
Which
anyone
one?
know?
Gazpacho?
Hmm?
I don't know. I didn't hear it well. What
It
do you
was yeah, it was some sort of red bean soup. Habichuelos or something like that.
mean? No, not
Does that
sure.
not sound familiar? Anyway, we're really enjoying it very much here, and again, I'm enjoying this tremendously. So everyone can see my screen, I assume.
Yes.
So so I know I have a different audience in terms of your different levels of expertise and experience in publishing. I have a very formal presentation, but I don't like formal presentations. Even my students back in America know that the slides are just sort of a prop. I just talk. So I just kind of go through them, and I would like to just have a chat. I know there's some of you on here are probably maybe haven't published very much or are looking to publish, some of you, and some of you, I recognize a couple of names, like Professor Pedro, have published quite a lot already. So I'm hoping to share a little bit different perspective, maybe from the perspective of an editor, including some things that most editors may not admit, and share with you some insights. As Celia mentioned, I'm the founding editor of two journals, Research and Social Administrative Pharmacy, or called RSAP. An impact factor of close to 4, which for a pharmacy practice journal is very high, almost unprecedented, I think. So we're very happy about that, of course. We publish on a wide range of topics. I know some of you, like Professor Pedro and Celia and some others, have a few papers in the journal. It's a very theory-driven journal, and that's important, because I'm not here to just talk about RSAP, but the fact that it is theory-driven leads me to a point that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, which is making sure that your manuscripts match the mission and scope of the journal that you're aiming. I mean, I'll talk about it more later, but many times we get papers that the science looks okay, at least good enough to be peer reviewed, but it just doesn't match the scope of the journal. And so, being that we get so many papers, I have to reject so many of them, because we don't have the amount of manpower, labor capital to review them all. And so a lot of times things are just rejected because they don't fit in the scope of the journal. And in RSAP, it's a very theory-driven, very methods-driven journal. And of course, every journal wants to publish papers with good methods, but we actually niche in that area, so it's very important. But I founded a second journal, which I don't have. Oh, I do have a few notes about it. So we founded it about 4 years ago, and one of the reasons is because the journal began getting so many papers that were good, but didn't quite fit the scope of RSAP. So we basically created a second one. And actually, so you see, this is a little bit dated. We got our first impact factor score in the very first year as eligible, this past June. And since we got our first impact factor score, the number of submissions to the journal are going up like crazy. And we actually have a lot of the same people who publish in RSAP, which are really some of the top pharmacy practice scholars around the world, are actually publishing in this second journal as well. One thing I want to say is that do you know what the worst kind of paper is? What's the worst kind of paper, or the worst thing that a paper can be? One that is never written and submitted. That's the worst kind of paper. There are so many things that we do, and we don't realize that they actually can qualify for a really nice paper. For example, commentaries. Now, not every journal has these. RSAP is one, but there are other pharmacy practice journals that have a commentary. Our commentary, I want to distinguish that very separately from just a brief letter to the editor. A brief letter to the editor may be just a few hundred words, maybe 2 or 3 references. I'm talking about a really scholarly commentary with maybe 30, 40, 50 references. But it's not a literature review. It's not a systematic literature review. It's a commentary. It's a well thought, well-referenced, well-cited commentary on a bit of work that calls for attention. Most people involved in research invariably are in the midst of the literature. Because if you're doing research, obviously you are looking up papers in PubMed, you're looking up papers in Google Scholar or CINAHL or wherever you're looking up papers, which is probably a combination of those. So you have developed an expertise, okay, because you have read abstracts, you may have read dozens of papers, and so you've really gotten a really good idea about something that goes beyond just what accompanies your research. And oftentimes this can create, or at least serve as the foundation for a really good commentary piece. We also have methods pieces that are instructive to how really to execute very well a particular method. Our journal in particular has updates on best practices in qualitative research, updates on best practices using certain theoretical foundations, best practices on implementation science, which I know that Victoria and her graduate students work on very, very much so. So this actually can serve as really good papers. And I will share this with you. Obviously, research is extraordinarily important, and it's the backbone of science, and it's the backbone of peer review, and it's the backbone of most journals. However, sometimes the 800th paper on the same topic, that moves the needle this much, actually does less than a very, very thoughtful commentary. I was looking with our publisher the other day at the history of the journal, and RSAP is 20 years old. And 8 of our top 10 most cited papers in the journal's history are commentaries. The other 2 are systematic reviews. So none of the top 10 most cited papers were actually original research papers. I'm not saying don't publish original research papers. I'm just telling you to think about all the things that you could be doing besides just writing regular research papers. And sometimes I don't know if you use the expression in Spain very much, move the needle. In other words, actually make substantial progress. Sometimes more progress is made by a very thoughtful commentary, sometimes a very thoughtful and well-executed systematic review than just another original research paper. So I just want to emphasize that. I'll just say really briefly that sometimes, well, not sometimes, always, good reading habits. Yeah, I know that sounds simple, right? I mean, who among us can't read a journal paper? But sometimes really good reading habits actually translate to good writing habits. We have the temptation when we're reading papers to we have a lot of bias, right? So, for example, when you're looking at a paper and you see who the authors are, does that bias you right away? You see what country it's from, does that bias you? Yes, it does. And you see what journal it's in, does that bias you? Yes, it does. And that's only natural. Okay, we can't help that. We can't fight that internal inclination. But it's something that we have to grapple with. And really, we should read a paper just as if you're a teacher and you have a paper from a student, you want to try to be unbiased. You don't want to give very high marks or very poor marks because you really like the student, you really don't like the student, that kind of thing. Same thing when you're looking at a manuscript. When you're reading something that's published, don't take a position on the paper. Don't think it's good, don't think it's bad just because of who the author is or what journal it's in or where the author comes from. Okay, whether it was from Spain or the United States or from Portugal or South Africa or China. Don't bias yourself. So I think those sorts of things, reading tips, actually translate into good writing. I will go over some of these things. Like I said, this is about also being when it's now been close to 30 years that I finished my PhD. And I finished it very young, though, in case you're thinking that I'm really, really old by saying that. Well, I am kind of old. I'm old compared to Celia. I'm even old compared to Adriana. Adriana shared with me her age yesterday, and I was very stunned because I thought she was in her 20s. But I won't say how old she is, but she's, it's a compliment to her because I certainly thought she was older than she looks. But I should have known because she's very wise. So I should have known she was older. She's very wise, but she just looks so young. But anyhow, when I finished my PhD 30 years ago, I right away started volunteering to review manuscripts. And I realized, of course, my PhD training obviously equipped me with the ability to peer review. But I realized that the first 7 or 8 peer reviews that I conducted as a brand new faculty member, I realized that I learned more in those 7 or 8 peer reviews than I did in my whole PhD program. Again, that's not to say, I mean, obviously my PhD program set me up to be able to do that, but I learned so much more. And as a journal editor, of course, I get, in spite of the fact that it makes me busy, I'm here in Spain, and yet I'm still working with a journal about 6 or 8 hours a day. I just see so many papers and learn so much from what I see. So I would encourage you to really put yourself out there. I know with RSAP, for example, you can simply register yourself into the system, and I think that is the case for most journals nowadays. Simply go to the journal's website. Any journal that you respect, any journal that you might want to publish in someday, go in there and register yourself as a reviewer. Because otherwise you may, every once in a while I get an email from someone say, hey, I would like to be a reviewer. Okay, that's wonderful. We need reviewers, but you have to register yourself in the system. If you're not registered in the system, we're not going to find you. And of course, good reviewers make my job a lot easier and really help to advance science, because ultimately I and associate editors make the decision on whether to accept a paper or not. But the quality of the paper is really driven by the review process. It's the reviewers that help shape the paper. I help shape the paper by picking good reviewers, sometimes telling an author who is revising a paper to pay a particular attention to certain comments by 1 or 2 of the reviewers and so forth. But the reviewers really do a lot by shaping the papers. So one of the things I have here about reviewing is to looking for, and this is what I will tell you as prospective authors. The reason, the 2 reasons I think that most papers are rejected nowadays, because one, like I said, a lack of journal fit. So always look and see what kind of papers are being published. Look at the table of contents from the past 3 or 4 issues. See what kinds of papers are being, see what kind of papers are being published. But also, there are so many papers now that just repeat the same things that we already know. They're descriptive in nature, and it's papers like, well, there's the authors acknowledge, well, there's been 1,000 papers on medication adherence before, but there's never been one to describe medication non-adherence among diabetics in Cordoba. I don't care. No one else cares. Okay, there's already been 1 million papers describing medication non-adherence in millions of populations over and over again. Okay, So the fact that it's been done everywhere, but not in Cordoba or not in Cape Town, South Africa, or wherever, I don't care. And increasingly, I've talked, because I talk with other journal editors. We now, as part of the Granada statements, we actually talk with each other all the time. I talk with Derek Stewart, who is the chief editor for International Journal of Clinical Pharmacy. We talk all the time. I talk with Zahir Babar, who's the editor of the Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice. I talk all the time with Christine Bond, who is the editor for the Journal of Pharmacy Practice, International Journal of Pharmacy Practice, and we're all saying this right now. There's just too much called Me Too work, just describing something that's been described over and over again. And the authors are trying to say, well, this was just a little different than the million other papers that have been published in this area. Okay, that's rejection. You may have beautiful methods. You may have executed the project flawlessly, but you have to distinguish your paper and tell us what we are learning by your paper that is not already known. And that's why the discussion section is really, really important. Obviously, the introduction section is important as well, but the discussion section, you go and you contrast and compare your results with what exists in the current literature and tell us what knowledge specifically has been gained from your project that would be of value to an international audience, because increasingly most journals that certainly have a big impact factor or that have a, they're mostly international. So again, that's why no one cares about, because if I have an article that, and in my journal is international, so one, as an editor, I want the paper to be cited. I want it to contribute to the impact factor, but I also want it to be read and shared and enjoyed and be of use. So if you're telling me that, oh, this is medication non-adherence in Cape Town, South Africa, well, then right away, and titles even titles of papers are important. And so I tell authors all the time, we're changing the title of your paper, even if it's accepted. Right away, 99% of international readers are going to read that title, medication non-adherence in Cape Town, South Africa, and think, I'm not interested in this. So right away, I have a paper that 99% of my audience doesn't care about by looking at the title. So again, think if we're becoming more international. So I even, on this trip, let me tell you something. On this trip, for example, since I received so many manuscripts and still have to deal with them here in Spain, and sometimes I'm not at the university, and I'm dealing with just on my iPad in my hotel room. So I actually emailed myself some rejection language and some transfer language. And the rejection language says RSAP prioritizes theory-driven papers and papers that have a global context and not a regional context. And because 99% of the time when I reject a paper, that's why. So I don't even have to think of new words. So I emailed myself, so I copy and paste that into the thing on my iPad, and I send it to if it is indeed a rejection, that's what I do. I send it out. I mean, these are some things that I will, like I said, I don't sit there and read slides. I'm gonna share these slides with Celia and Adriana, and they can share them with you. It's fine with me. I think this is just a more of a discussion. Like I said, selecting the most important journal. Let me tell you something. Okay, now I'm going to start telling you a few things maybe that other journal editors won't necessarily tell you, at least not tell you that directly. So we're all concerned with impact factor. It's the currency that we use to evaluate journals. It's the currency that we use to evaluate each other, along with an H index and so forth and so on. So obviously, I'm not going to tell you it's unimportant. Of course, I care very much about the journal's impact factor. But having said that, you can't have a strategy of just, I'm going to find the journal with the highest impact factor and send it there. Because some people think that, and they say, well, if it gets rejected, then I'll just send it to the next one. And if it gets rejected there, I'll send it to the next one. No, pharmacy practice is a relatively small world, even if it's global. And you will find that journals have a certain number of reviewers, and these reviewers review for the same journals. Okay, many of my reviewers also review for International Journal of Clinical Pharmacy. They also review for International Journal of Pharmacy Practice. They review for the Journal of the American Pharmacists Association. So you send your manuscript somewhere and it gets rejected. And you say, okay, well, I'll send it somewhere else, and it gets rejected. Then you send it somewhere else. By the time you send it to the third journal, this is what often happens. The reviewer says, you know what? I already reviewed this paper for another journal, this very same paper, and the authors really haven't changed anything, and then they reject it. So a paper starts to carry a smell after it hasn't been accepted for a while, and it's been lingering for a bit, and has been rejected 2 or 3 times. It starts to carry an odor. It starts to stink. So every one of us has, I've had a number of papers rejected myself as an author. Of course, every one of us had. Anybody who has tried to publish a number of papers has had some rejections. But try to get it accepted into the first journal you submit it to. So should you consider the journal's impact? Of course you should, but you also should be considering what is the best fit for this paper. Who is the audience that I'm trying to reach? Who is the people that are most likely to be interested in this paper? That is one of the top things that you should be looking at when selecting the most appropriate journal. Okay, looking at the journal's mission and scope, finding the best fit. Look at the recent papers published. Ideally, of course, what you want to do is submit to a journal that is publishing papers similar to yours in the sense that it deals with that topic area, similar to yours in terms of the level of rigor in which you conducted the research or conducted the systematic review, that kind of thing. But you're still adding something a little bit new and adding something to the existing literature in that area. So if you see a journal has published a few papers, let's say on implementation science for new anticoagulation clinics in community pharmacy. Let's say you found a journal that has published 3 or 4 papers in that area. So that tells you, oh, this journal is very interested in that topic. So as long as your paper adds something new to what those 3 or 4 papers already published in that same journal, that's probably a really good fit. Now, you should still spread your papers out among different journals. Now, I notice I have this here, within versus outside of the discipline. Now, us editors talk about this. A lot of times, now, I'm proud that RSAP has an impact factor of near 4. Some of the impact factors of some of the other journals have been increasing lately, like the International Journal of Clinical Pharmacy, International Journal of Pharmacy Practice, a few more. However, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, because people say, well, I'm not going to submit my paper to the pharmacy practice journals because they don't have a high enough impact factor. Well, if you never send your best work to our journals, then how is the journal ever going to have a higher impact factor? How is it ever going to be recognized if you don't send your, so I can tell you, and I've discussed this with other authors. So maybe you have a really nice project, a project that's going to produce 3 or 4 papers. And hopefully you're doing good projects that can have 3 or 4 papers come out of one project. And what authors will do is that they will take the best paper from that project. Because as always, you know, you have a project that can produce 2, 3, 4 papers, let's say, but there's often the best one. Okay, the one that really establishes the model, or the one that really reports the primary outcomes of a particular intervention. And they send it to, say, a medical or a public health journal, not a pharmacy journal, even though it was pharmacy related. Then by the time they get to the third or the fourth paper, which is just things like, oh, people were satisfied with the intervention, the pharmacists enjoyed participating, which is not completely unimportant, but definitely much less important than the primary paper. So they then send that one to the pharmacy journal. I see this paper, and again, I've discussed this with Derek and Christine and a number of others. We can tell, it's very easy to tell that this is the fourth or fifth paper from this project. And so we're rejecting them now. So send us your best work. If you want the discipline to improve, then you need to send us some of your best work. Also, cultivate relationships with journals. I can tell you, okay, so again, here's something that maybe journal editors won't always admit. So, am I biased? Yes, I am. I try not to be biased just by the nature of the person or the school or the country and so forth. But I am biased by the people that have established a good relationship with the journal. That means that they have conducted peer reviews. They have done so in a very professional manner. They have done so in a very thorough manner, a very scientifically accurate manner. They've occasionally submitted some of really good works. They're active with the journal. Sometimes they repost our posts on social media, even things like that. They've established a good relationship. Am I biased? Yes. Okay. Now, am I going to take someone who I really like, or or is a friend, or has a really good relationship with the journal, and if they send something that's really outside the scope, or let's say it's just not good for whatever reason, am I going to publish it? No. But let's be very honest. Okay, there's a very few papers that when they get put through peer review, the peer reviewers say, oh, this is a fantastic paper. This is the greatest paper I've ever seen. Accept it right away. Okay, that very seldom happens. And it's also very seldom, because I desk reject probably 70% of papers that come to my journal. So it's also very seldom that a paper has made it to peer review and the reviewers say, this is awful, and all three recommend rejection. That seldom happens. What often happens is 2 out of the 3 recommend pursuing publication and 1 recommends rejection. So it's on the fence. That's when you have a good relationship with the journal. That's probably going to help. And then even before the peer review process, because again, we get so many submissions, and many other journals do. I know I talked with Derek Stewart, the editor for International Journal of Clinical Pharmacy. I think they're getting 1,200 or 1,300 submissions a year. They're desk rejecting, just like us, 70, 75% of papers. And so I'll get a paper and it looks good, but it's kind of on the borderline whether it's in the scope of RSAP or not. I could see it maybe being in the journal, but I could also see possibly referring it to my other journal. I'll admit, you have a good relationship with the journal, that's going to help. I mean, like I said, we don't publish bad things, and I don't turn away really good things, but there's things that are on the border. I mean, I give a little bit of favor in that regard to people from my own institution. To be honest, I give a little bit of favor for the people from the University of Granada and other schools that I know well. Again, I'm not saying that I accept bad papers or reject good ones, but there's a lot of papers that are on the fence. Establish a good relationship with the journal. Now, the abstract is the most important 300 words of that entire manuscript that you submit. You know, when you send that cover letter that says, "Dear editor, I'm so pleased to submit this journal. I'm so pleased to submit this paper. It's the greatest paper ever. We're the first people that did this, blah, 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 blah." It's a beautiful, beautiful letter. Now, I'm not speaking for every editor. Do you know what I do with those? I don't even read them. I don't think I've read one in a year. I don't read the cover letter. I go straight to the abstract. And I can tell you, having done this for 20 years, I will read the abstract and I will be able to predict with at least 95% accuracy whether the paper is ultimately going to end up getting published in the journal. With at least 95% accuracy. Every once in a while, I read an abstract and I end up being surprised that it gets published, or I get surprised that it gets rejected. But with very great accuracy, I can predict whether a paper is going to get published just by reading the abstract when it is submitted. So absolutely don't focus your efforts on that abstract. Don't have misspellings, don't have typographical errors. Don't make silly mistakes. I mean, you know, if you type a 4,000 word manuscript, hopefully it's as clean as possible. But we understand. I've submitted papers that I said, "Oh, look at that on page 17. I have a typo right there. I can't believe I missed that, even with the spell check." But it happens. Don't let it happen with the abstract. Don't let it happen. It's going to increase by threefold the likelihood that the paper is going to get rejected if you have some errors in the abstract. I can tell you that right now. The introduction. You know, get right to the point. Here's an issue with pharmacy practice. Sometimes we spend so much time establishing the literature and we go off on tangents. I can tell you, I'll give you a very specific example. There was a paper that I received once, and it was proposing a new health-related quality of life measure for diabetes. Sounds like a great topic, right? Sounds like I mean, right away, yeah, certainly. I'm very interested in a new health-related quality of life instrument for diabetes. But the paper begins, the first sentence was something like, "Diabetes is a worldwide problem." Really? Don't we know already that diabetes is a worldwide problem? Diabetes costs the world $8 trillion per year. I can find that in a textbook. Diabetes has a lot of comorbidities. Again, I can find this in a textbook for first-year pharmacy students. And they went on for 3-4 pages about the problematic nature of diabetes. Our audience is not first-year pharmacy students. Our audience is scientists from around the world. They already know this about diabetes. We don't need that. If your paper is about a new health-related quality of life measure in diabetes, the first sentence should be something like, "Measuring health-related quality of life in diabetes has proven to be problematic." Boom, straight to the point. I don't need to hear that diabetes costs $10 trillion a year. Again, that's for a textbook for first-year pharmacy students. So concise, get to the point. And if we had more time, this is something that I would do. You know, it's like, again, that was my example. What should the first sentence look like for this? A proposed new health quality of life. While health-related quality of life measures for diabetes exist, there are no valid measures that can be easily administered during the process of care. That would be a good first sentence. An evaluation of pharmacy technicians' actual performance after they get certified, like a credentialing for a technician. Evidence suggests that training and certification is beneficial to technicians. However, there have been no studies accounting for actual performance during this educational activity. Not oh, pharmacy technicians are very valued people. We don't pay them enough. They work so hard. We don't, we know all that stuff already. So just get to the point. The methods to me is actually the easiest part of the paper to write because it's just what you did. It's just make sure that you are very, very clear. And again, know your audience. Is it a methods-driven journal? Like if you submit a paper to RSAP and let's say it's a survey, I better see things about reliability. I better see things about validity. I better see also, if you're sending a qualitative paper, I want to see what you've done to triangulate the results. So, just be clear and be thorough. The results, and I said, discussion, I mentioned this, just this is where you contextualize the findings. The conclusion, a lot of people, I get papers where people actually putting new information in the conclusion section. Are they putting references in the conclusion section? No. I will just, I know we want to leave some time for some questions and so forth. So, these are just some additional hints. I'll leave this with Celia and with Adriana. Like I said, select the most important journal. Oh, so we actually conducted our own study in RSAP, and we looked at what are the factors that drive citations. We looked at 900 papers published from the years 2014 to 2017 in RSAP, in International Journal of Clinical Pharmacy, and International Journal of Pharmacy Practice. We looked at all sorts of things, where the paper was from, the H-index of the authors, whether the paper had international collaboration, all sorts of things. The only things that were significant in driving citations were use of social media and the number of citations in the paper itself. So the more references the paper had, the more likely it was going to be cited. And that's probably because they did a better job of comparing and contrasting the literature. Believe it, we looked at about 15 things, and these were the two things that actually drove citations: social media and the number of references in the paper itself. It didn't matter whether the paper was from Europe or the United States. It didn't matter whether there was one author or there was 20 authors. None of it mattered. These were the two things. Here's a thing. Okay, here's another thing, and I know Celia's very worried that I'm going over time. She's starting to make some faces.
No, it's okay. Go on.
I'm teasing you, Celia. Like I said, avoid Me Too papers. Here's another hint. There was actually a peer-reviewed study. There's actually been 3 of them. And they looked at when to submit your paper. And a paper is more likely to be rejected if it's submitted on the weekends. There could be several reasons for this. I know I handle things as an editor on a weekly basis, every week. And the submissions start piling up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We get so many submissions that by Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because I don't like to give more than 1 paper to each of my associate editors, I'm running out of people to use. And plus, just if you don't like to receive work on weekends, then editors and reviewers don't either. Even if you intend on getting to it later, no one likes to get emails that says you have work. Plus, I've noticed, so I can tell, of course, where a paper comes from and when it was submitted. I'll notice sometimes, and I can't help but notice, I'm human just like anyone else, that a paper was submitted at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning at that time. Oh, there's so many times a paper is submitted and about 30 minutes later, I get an email. Dear Dr. Desselle, we just submitted a paper to your journal. Yes, I already know that because the system notifies me when I get it. I don't need an email from you telling me that you've submitted a paper because the system has already told me that. We made a big mistake. We forgot one of the authors, or we put the wrong abstract in. We made some big mistake. Can you send the paper back to us and then resubmit it again? You know what? You're wasting my time. I'm just going to be honest. You're wasting my time. So I look, journal editors like myself, this is something I do extra. I get a small stipend each month. This is not a get rich scheme. This is 20 years of service for 20, 30 hours a week for just a little bit of money that I get. I don't have time for this crap. So you have a big error in your submission. And oftentimes when people are working on papers at 2 or 3 in the morning, working on them at weekends because they want to finish and have the rest of the weekend and they want to submit that paper, they have errors. And as competitive as it is right now, you send me a paper with a big error, done. You're rejected. I'm just being very honest. So be careful about just clearing your desk. Also, the last thing before we have some questions is, and this is my friend Fernanda, you've heard of Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step programs. So you've been rejected. Get mad, get over it, wait 1 or 2 days, gather your thoughts, decipher the editor's meaning in the letter, isolate comments to address because you're going to send it somewhere else. Now, honesty, transparency, and clarity are so important. I've had just a few instances where people have submitted a paper. They've actually stated this paper was rejected by this journal. This is why they rejected it. This is what we've done to address that. Every time a person has done that, we've ended up accepting the paper. Don't pretend. It's no use trying to hide that it's been. Just be transparent. Be clear. The more transparent and clear you are, the better off you are. Yes, the Granada statements. Hopefully you've checked them out. Because we had a meeting in Granada 2 years ago, and we developed the Granada statements. Me and Victoria and others are very active in this. We've had our second meeting in Basel, Switzerland this past summer. And we are going to publish an update on the Granada statements. Now we're called the International Collaboration of Pharmacy Journal Editors, ICPJE. And we have some very, very insightful tips in this website. And Victoria and I will be updating that very soon. And it has some really nice suggestions, like some of the ones I've stated, but also in much greater detail in the Granada statements. So with that being said, hopefully we have a little bit of time and hopefully we might have a little bit of audience participation and questions. I would be delighted to hear from you. Now Celia's happy because she was thinking, oh my God, he's going so much over time.
No,
Celia's
we are good. We are good. Thank you for the presentation.
Any questions? Yes.
Hello, I'm from Mexico, and it was very nice to hear your conference. Sorry, my English is not very well, but I have a question.
Your English is a lot better than my Spanish.
Thank you so much. How can we cultivate relationships with journalists? Maybe you say something about that, but it was not totally clear about that.
For one, review papers. That's the most important thing. And do so, don't be late. If you say that you're going to meet the deadline, meet the deadline. Do a good job. Be thorough. Be accurate in your reviews. Submit to that journal. Submit really good papers to that journal. That way the editors and reviewers are going to say, wow, she's got some really nice work. And so the next paper you send, they're going to be positively biased towards your paper because they've already seen a really good paper. Now you send the second one right away. Oh, this is Celine Huerta. Sorry, I'm just looking at your thumbnail. I'm not sure if that's how you say or pronounce or that's your full name. But, oh, look at Celine Huerta. She sent us a paper last year. It was really good. Oh, I bet this paper is going to be good too. I mean, we're human. I'm telling you, we try not to be biased, but we are biased. So just, review, send good work. Sometimes now people email me sometimes and they say, oh, can you look at this abstract and tell me if this would be a fit for your journal? Like, I don't have time for that. But sometimes people send me very compelling questions and they'll say, I've got an idea for a special issue, or I've got a very interesting concept on a new method. So if you email the editor with something very compelling, doing a really good job reviewing, sending good work, you cultivate a relationship with journals. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I have one. Hi.
Yes, please. Is that you, Zubi?
Yes, it's me. My camera doesn't work, but yeah, it's me.
You're just hiding, Zubi. Okay.
No, I can't. Well, so my question is about, so you said that sometimes if the topics are too investigated or maybe there's like a lot of research about a certain topic, it's better if we look for another topic, no? So my question is, how do we know if the topic has been, like how many articles, how much research it has to be out there in order for us to know if the topic is burned,
Sometimes look at the topic of medication non-adherence, for example. I mean, there has been thousands and thousands and thousands of papers on medication non-adherence. Does that mean you should abandon medication non-adherence? Absolutely not, because in spite of all those papers, we're still at 50% non-adherence worldwide. So it's still a problem. So again, what new knowledge does your paper bring to what we already know? That's the key. So it's not that you should or shouldn't do papers in medication non-adherence or developing clinics in the community pharmacy. But I would say very basic descriptive work is really falling out of favor right now. We're looking for theory-driven. We're looking for interventions. We're looking for outcomes. So just describing something, probably not, unless it's something really new, probably not really good unless you're willing to accept it in have it published in a very lower tier journal or even a magazine. So it's just like, it's not necessarily the topic. It is, and we actually, again, with the Granada statements and we talk about this, and with our own investigation in RSAP that I was telling you about citations, another thing that was significant was indeed the topic. And what we saw is that pharmacy has this issue where we keep evaluating ourselves. Do dentists like pharmacists? Do physicians like pharmacists? Do patients like pharmacists? And so forth. And think about it. No one outside of pharmacy would ever cite this paper. No one cares. So answer questions of relevance and answer questions that we didn't know the answer to before. So it's not necessarily what's a good topic, what's a bad topic. It's your approach to that topic and the novelty and the angle in which you're taking. I hope that helps.
Yep.
Any other questions? If there's so few questions, that means I was really bad or really good. I've either answered all your questions already, or it's so boring that you have nothing, you have no interest. It's one of those two, probably. Celine, yes, please.
I'm sorry, but I think that it was really good to take advantage of your presence. So in Mexico, we have like a disadvantage because all topics in all over the world has been explored. But in Mexico, we have a very little or limited information about the special pediatrics patients. So my question is, if we have only like a pilot study, because it's really hard to take many patients in the study, what kind of tips do you think that we can take? One of the topics is related to therapy intensive, like a UC in the patients. And I think the advantage is because we evaluate all related, not only doses, like an administration route and another 9 points related that, but we only have like 5 or 10 patients. So what do you recommend about that?
So different journals have different takes on that. Some have a big problem with a small number of patients and so forth. I don't care about that. Did you execute it very well? And do you have a compelling story to tell? Okay, so did you execute the project well? Are you telling us something that we didn't know already? Now, I know, for example, we don't get a lot of papers from Mexico, but we get some, as well as from South America and in some developing countries of Asia. And we've published a number of them. But again, I also get a lot of papers that say, blah, 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 in Indonesia. And there's nothing new. Well, maybe some journal will publish that. I know that I'm not interested in that. Now, it's about context. So for example, if you're submitting to an international journal, make it internationally appealing. So Mexico is its own country, so is the United States, so is Spain, so is Poland, so is everywhere, okay? But if you can cite and say, you know what, this is something we're doing in Mexico, but it probably has relevance in other countries that are somewhat like Mexico, and not say like Mexico in the sense that people are Hispanic, but like Mexico in the sense that it's similar socioeconomic status, similar in terms of its development and so forth. And you say, you know what, this is a pathway that we're trying out in Mexico, and this looks good and could also be favorable in other developing countries, and tell us why it could be. Because my audience is international. My audience is not just from Mexico. So if someone from Vietnam or Spain or Russia might have an interest in your paper, then it could be a compelling paper. So again, citing, keeping what exactly are you contributing to the knowledge that we have?
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll be sad if neither Celia nor Adriana has a question. I know that Celia has like 1,000 papers already at the age of 30. So I know it's just nothing new for her, but still, I was hoping maybe Celia or Adriana might have a, because I'm putting them on the spot now.
Yes, you are, but we have you at the university, so we can also ask you there. And for the students in Granada, Shane will be again on Monday giving us a new conference on a new topic, but not online this time. So if you are interested, it will be published in
A
our new-
very different talk, though.
very
A
different.
very, this talk is going to be about my own research on Monday.
Mhm.
Yes. No, I just wanted to thank you because, yeah, the whole thing that you have presented, it has been very helpful for me, actually, as you said, because I am, working on my first publication, as you know. So, taking into account all the steps and all the highlights that you mentioned, it's very important in the abstract, for example, the abstract highlight that you mentioned, because you're right. If we don't get your attention with the abstract, or editor's attention with the abstract, the rest of the article is not going to be read. So
You're right.
yeah. So yeah, it's very useful, and thank you for sharing all of this with us.
You're welcome. And Celia and Adriana, I mean, I think you might have this presentation already, but I'll email it to you. And I mean, it's, I'm not trying to hide anything. Everybody can have a copy of the presentation. It's fine with me. So,
Yeah.
I guess
And
we're
we will
ending it,
try-
I suppose. So
Yeah.
thank you for your participation and your attention. Is much appreciated. I'm glad we had such a nice group. It looks like we had like 20 something people join us. So I was really happy about that. So again, thank you all. And if you're around the university on Monday, come and visit in person. We'd love to see you.
Thank you.
Celia and Adriana are making some homemade treats they're going to give everyone. They're baking and they're
Yeah.
all kinds of nice
Okay.
things if you come. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.